I think so. Maybe we still up.
Thanks, everyone. We are now live. Take it away.
Excellent. Well, good afternoon and welcome, everybody. My name is John Grimes, and I'm the host of today's Breakout session. I'm the Chief Executive of the Smart Energy Council. We're an independent peak industry body for the smart energy industry. And we're really interested in transitioning to a 100% renewable system as soon as possible, and not just powering our economy with our renewable energy, but actually capturing our fantastic sunshine and wind and turning it into gases, fuels and products that we export to the world, so that we remain an energy exporting superpower, except what we export is renewable energy, not dirty fossil fuels. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from Ngunnawal country today, and I pay my respect to traditional elders past, present and emerging, and to all of the traditional owners from all of the lands on which you're coming to this session from. And I'd particularly like to welcome any First Nations people joining our session today. I'm going to introduce our speakers today. I just encourage you to have a look at a couple of buttons that will help along the way. The first is the chat feature. So it's on the right-hand side of your screen, and if you can put chat function in there, and you can kind of play along at home. So if you've got interesting facts or links to reports or news articles that you want to share with people, feel free to put it into the chat. It's a really fun way to kind of bring the session to life, and so definitely interact in that way. The other button you'll be interested in is the Q&A button. And here you can write your questions that we'll go through and get as many to our speakers as possible. But make sure if you've got a question, put it in the Q&A area, not in the chat area. We might not see it in the chat area, so make sure it goes in the Q&A area. If you need to contact our events team or tech support, navigate to the inbox at the top of your screen and search for event support, and you'll be able to chat in real time to them in that box. So with no further ado, let's get underway for this cracking session. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Chloe Hicks. Chloe is a public sector leader with over 8 years experience in the New South Wales government delivering energy, water and climate change policies. And she's been responsible for including the 2020 Electricity Infrastructure Roadmap, a non-trivial piece of work, and enabling legislation. As Director, Energy Infrastructure and Zones, she leads delivery of Australia's first coordinated renewable energy zones, establishment of the Energy Corporation of New South Wales, and implementation of the pumped hydro recoverable grants, emerging energy and case management programs. I don't know what she does in her spare time. She's really busy. Chloe has a postgraduate qualifications in policy, business and public sector management, and is a fellow of the Centre for Sustainability Leadership. She's passionate about ensuring energy infrastructure is developed in a way that benefits regional communities, and was awarded a Churchill Fellowship in 2020 to study world-leading models for renewable energy zones worldwide. Please welcome Chloe Hicks.
Thank you, John. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. I'd firstly like to say thank you to Better Futures Australia for connecting us all through this event today. There's never been a more important time for forging these connections and focusing on what we want our country to look like going into the future. So today I'll be talking about renewable energy zones, which is one of my favourite topics, and the broader electricity infrastructure roadmap. I'd firstly, though, also like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land where we meet today. And for me, in Darlinghurst, Sydney, that's the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And if I were going to be locked down anywhere, I'm grateful it's on this beautiful Gadigal land. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that will host New South Wales renewable energy zones. And this includes the Wiradjuri, Walwan and Kamilaroi people of the Central West Arana region, And here in New South Wales Government, we are very committed to delivering positive outcomes for First Nations communities across New South Wales as part of our work on renewable energy zones and the roadmap. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So moving on then to renewable energy zones, effectively they are modern day power stations. They bring together generation like solar and wind farms with storage such as batteries and pumped hydro with network infrastructure. And in doing this, they will deliver $20 billion of investment for regional New South Wales and provide cheap, reliable and clean energy for homes and businesses. Released at the end of last year, the Electricity Infrastructure Roadmap, which John mentioned earlier, and its enabling legislation set out a clear framework to not only deliver renewable energy zones, but also ensure 12 gigawatts of renewables and 2 gigawatts of storage are built by 2030. This is especially important because we know that over the next 15 years, 4 of our 5 remaining coal-fired power stations are set to reach the end of their lives and retire. And these power stations took around 30 years to plan and build. So our challenge is to replace them in just half this time. The good news is we have the solutions, and the roadmap is our legislated plan to bring online new renewable generation, building the new network infrastructure to allow these generators to connect to the grid, and delivering pumped hydro and batteries to keep the system stable and reliable. And we'll be doing this through a range of different initiatives, including the first is renewable energy zones. And the Minister for Energy is to declare 5 renewable energy zones across New South Wales. And these are in the Central West Orana, New England, Southwest, Hunter Central Coast, and Southwest regions. The second is long-term energy service agreements, which will provide revenue guarantees for renewable energy and storage projects, including in RES. And I use RES a bit, sorry, it's the Australian habit of nicknaming everything. So renewable energy zones we call RES. Then there's the transmission development scheme, which will help to modernise our grid. And finally, pumped hydro recoverable grants to help build the storage we need to back up a more renewable system. And our modelling shows that the roadmap will reduce energy bill volatility and save New South Wales households around $130 each year and businesses $430 each year. It will also reduce New South Wales's carbon emissions by 90 million tonnes and support an estimated 9,000 jobs by 2030. Importantly, the roadmap and its legislation also provide levers to make sure we deliver this infrastructure in a way that brings regional communities on the journey too. And our regions will disproportionately benefit from new electricity infrastructure. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Landholders who host electricity infrastructure are set to receive a total of $1.5 billion in direct payments for hosting this by 2042. But at the same time, our regional communities will also be disproportionately impacted by having these developments in their regions. And this should be recognised and the role that they will play in powering our state into the future. We've already started work in making sure this happens through a number of different actions. The first is we've established the Renewable Energy Sector Board. And this has been set up to maximise the use of local content and workers in renewable energy zones. We've also been running regional reference groups in the Central West Orana and New England regions over the past several months now, including last year, and that's with local councils, Aboriginal land councils and other regional stakeholders. And we bring these stakeholders together to ensure that they're part of the RES design phase as well as its delivery and make sure that local priorities and values are brought to the centre of that design. We're also developing guidelines to support best practice engagement and negotiation with First Nations people with an aim of increasing employment outcomes. We've also designed a RES access scheme, which is about how the generators connect to the network within the renewable energy zones. And a key feature of this design is that it will include a community and employment contribution. So connecting generators will directly contribute through the renewable energy zones to better outcomes for the communities that host the infrastructure. And we've also set up a new dedicated body, the Energy Corporation, which is also the infrastructure planner. And it has been set up to coordinate whole of res engagement and benefit sharing schemes. Stepping back one level in terms of what the broader roadmap and RES implementation has been focused on, we've really had 5 key priorities as we've moved from getting the roadmap out into the world at the end of last year and where we are today, having been in implementation mode now for about 8 months. The first has been governance, and that's included setting up the entities that will ultimately implement the roadmap. So we've set up a task force that includes a range of both internal and external stakeholders, and we've really focused on some of the key initial appointments. One of these, which was just announced recently, is that AEMO services, or the Australian Energy Market Operator Services, will be the consumer trustee, and the consumer trustee will have a key role in running competitive processes for long-term energy service agreements. It will work very closely with the Energy Corporation of New South Wales, which has been appointed and re-established and will be the infrastructure planner for the 5 New South Wales renewable energy zones. The second focus has been on resourcing, and that's really involved bringing in the right expertise and experience into our team and really setting ourselves up for success. But a key component of this has also been ensuring we have the right budget. And as part of the most recent New South Wales government budget, we received an additional $380 million, which brings our total budget for the roadmap and renewable energy zones to $500 million. The third has been the detailed design and enabling regulations. And this is ensuring that we get the settings right that sit below the legislation. And we've been running through a range of different consultation processes with industry and communities and other interested stakeholders on a range of these processes. So this included consulting on access schemes for renewable energy zones. And we ran a process from April to June of this year. And more recently, we've just released a consultation paper on the design of long-term energy service agreements. The fourth is renewable energy zones delivery. And we've been working on renewable energy zones for some time now. And in particular, we have a commitment to ensuring that the first renewable energy zone in Central West Arana is shovel ready by the end of 2022. So there's a lot of work that we've been doing. In particular, we've now received critical state significant infrastructure status for the planning pathway for that project. We've also released a transmission study corridor and a consulting with landholders and regional communities on that. I've mentioned already the RES access scheme, and then the next step will really be to formally declare that renewable energy zone. We've also recently run an industry process to seek registration of interest for the New England Renewable Energy Zone, which will be 8 gigawatts and likely to be built in stages, seeing it will be the largest renewable energy zone in Australia. And finally, our fifth focus has been on engagement. And I've already touched on a few of these points, but ultimately we can't implement such an ambitious and transformational reform package on our own. It's critical that we receive the best and brightest ideas from industry, communities, and other stakeholders about how this framework will actually come together and work. And on that note, I thank everyone who has already contributed, who's made submissions or applied to different aspects of our programs. Your contribution is really shaping the design of our work. On that note, I'll just finish here in flagging 3 of our consultation and application processes that are currently open. The first of those is innovative network design solutions for the Central West Arana Renewable Energy Zone, and we're seeking submissions from industry until the 20th of August. The second is that applications are currently open for the $50 million pumped hydro recoverable grants program, and those applications close on the 3rd of September. And then the final one is the long-term energy service agreements design consultation paper, which will be open for submissions until the 10th of September. I might wrap up there, but very keen to answer some questions.
Thank you, Chloe. I've got a couple of questions quickly for you before we go to the next speaker. The first one is about the new energy corporation in New South Wales. What will it be focusing on, and what will make it different to other government agencies?
Great question. So the Energy Corporation will really be focused on delivering renewable energy zones. And the nature of renewable energy zones is they involve a whole range of different parties, a whole range of different technologies and contracts to ultimately deliver a virtual power station that's equivalent to a traditional power station. So the Energy Corporation will really be the coordinating body that ensures all the different pieces come together, ensures that the investment settings are right, makes sure that there's whole of renewable energy zone consultation, engagement and benefit sharing schemes, and really resolve any issues that may stop the projects from going ahead. The Energy Corporation of New South Wales also has a formal role as part of our new legislation, and that is to be the infrastructure planner for the first 5 renewable energy zones. So it will undertake the early design of what the network should look like in the renewable energy zone, and it will recommend that network solution to the consumer trustee, who will ultimately authorise that solution and make sure it's in the best interests of New South Wales consumers.
Fantastic. These renewable energy zones are going to unlock 12,000 megawatts of new renewable energy in New South Wales. Can you give us a sense of what's the timelines looking like? So what are the key dates and milestones for when we'd start to see this new renewable energy coming online?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we're really focused on the Central West Arana Res as our first renewable energy zone. And we are expecting to have that project shovel ready by the end of next year. And when you look at the timeframes to then put the shovels in the ground and start the construction and the commissioning, it's very likely that that renewable energy zone will be commissioned in the mid-2020s, around 2025. We'll also be running processes for the competitive allocation of both the long-term energy service agreements as well as the access rights next year. And that will be a rolling process where we'll have multiple tender rounds. When you consider how much we're implementing, that will continue for some time until our targets are met.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Chloe. Hang around because we might come back to you as well at the end. So, but I'd like to go ahead now and introduce our next speaker, Georgie Skipper. Georgie is the Chief of Corporate and Government Affairs at Sun Cable and a foreign policy, trade, investment and international relations expert and a Fulbright scholar. From 2013 to 2018, Georgie was the Senior Advisor to the Foreign Minister of Australia, the Honourable Julie Bishop. Georgie was also the Foreign Minister's Principal United States Advisor, handling all policy issues where there was an intersection between Australian and US interests, with a focus on the Indo-Pacific region. Georgie was the Director of Global Public Policy at Atlassian and a member of the Board of Advice for the University of Sydney Business School. Please welcome Georgie Skipper.
Well, thank you very much, John, and thank you so much to the Better Futures Forum for having me here today. It's such an honour to be part of this very, very important event. And I too pay my respects to the traditional owners, those that are past, present and emerging traditional owners. I'm joining you from Gadigal of the Eora Nation, and I'm in Surrey Hills in Australia. It's a real pleasure to present to you. I thought maybe what I would do to kick us off is just to explain a little bit about what Sun Cable sees as one of the key challenges and opportunities in terms of where Australia sits and our access to phenomenal resources in the context of our solar resource and our land resource, and how we can really harness those resources for the benefit of Australia. So if that suits, I'll just kind of kick off and then obviously can take some questions and things from there. We at Sun Cable, which was founded in 2018, we have sort of identified this major opportunity and problem, and that is that there are a number of different locations, both in Australia and also internationally, that have large-scale demands for renewable electricity, but a little way of actually generating that renewable electricity at scale. And Singapore is a fantastic example of this. Obviously, very small land mass and has significant energy security and energy requirements. And in that context, there's also an abundant resource in Australia. And so we've got that abundant resource available to us in Australia, which we can actually harness and export overseas and also unlock future potential in Australia too. So just kind of starting at a really high level, just to recap a couple of principles around this. As many of us would know, being based here in Australia, land and solar is not foreign to us. We're very familiar with the abundance of these resources. But to put a finer point on this, there are 58 million petajoules that fall on Australia every year. And we utilise approximately 0.01% of those petajoules every year. And so we have this insane resource, this huge resource that is abundant and very available to us that we are currently underutilising. And in the context of the massive global demand and demand within Australia, of increasing demand for renewable energy, together and matched with the climate change considerations and net zero targets being set by other countries and indeed our other companies overseas as well, we see that there's a very good opportunity to kind of match up that demand and those resources too. To put a finer point on this as well, our land in Australia is of course very abundant, and that is emphasised. I'm not sure if you can see at the moment a graphic that I've got a short presentation for you, but essentially the size of our solar farm would be almost half a sesame seed if you put it on an A4 sheet of paper in the context of the Northern Territory's land. So we've got really, really mass scale abundant solar energy, really mass scale abundant solar energy. And on top of that, what's also happened in the last 5 years has been a very steep learning curve in a number of the technologies that are available to actually generate that electricity and then also transmit it. One of them is, of course, solar PV. And that technology is still emerging and still growing and still gaining in efficiencies on a daily basis, which is making it a lot more viable to do things at large scale. And also the other kind of major learning curve in terms of technologies is HVDC, high voltage direct current cable. And that particular technology is something that we're using in our project, which I'll explain a little bit in a second. But that fundamentally has had both intrinsic and external modes of learning that have actually changed the efficiencies of that, making it a lot more easy and more efficient and commercially viable to actually transmit electricity and not have such significant losses through that system. So in that context, Sun Cable is building a number of projects. Our first project is the Australian ASEAN Powerlink, which is providing electricity to Darwin and to the Northern Territory. And of course, our project is located in the Northern Territory. And then also sending renewable electricity to Singapore via a high voltage direct current cable system from Darwin to Singapore. I'm just going to quickly focus, though, for the context of this forum on the Northern Territory and a few relevant points there. So our solar farm generation site is close to Elliott. It's around 12,000 hectares and approximately sort of a 14 gigawatt size solar farm. With various different parts along the system, including a very large battery in 33 gigawatt hour battery, as well as voltage source converters. And we have established there is an interesting part to unlocking the potential of mass scale, large scale solar generation, and then actually inputting that in to unlock the economic potential for Australia. And we've focused a lot on understanding the Northern Territory and working with the Northern Territory government. And there is a significant opportunity to input affordable electricity into the Northern Territory to ensure that industrial size growth can occur in a territory to see it becomes and it reaches its own target set by the Chief Minister recently of becoming a $40 billion economy. And that time frame is very tight, so it has to look at ways it can do that, including through projects like ours. We've received major project status from the Commonwealth Government as well as from the Northern Territory Government, and that's in recognition of the strategic significance of our project. It's also worth noting too that we have signed a project development agreement with the Northern Territory Government, which essentially sets out a roadmap for how we deliver this project in the Territory. And of course, we're focusing a lot on the benefits for Australia and for the Territory, and working very closely, of course, with the land councils and the traditional owners across the whole site, from our generation site right through to Darwin. I suppose one thing to mention as well is that our concept of actually harnessing large scale solar generation and utilising that in Australia and also for export potential has been listed on the Infrastructure Australia priority listing. That was earlier this year. And that's a really significant piece, which means that essentially that problem of how to do that is something that we're working on at the moment to deliver the Australian ASEAN Power Link and future projects too. The Northern Territory Government has a number of different opportunities available to it in terms of identifying industrial size growth and tapping into that, including green manufacturing and a number of other things along the kind of pipeline. And so it's a big part of how the Northern Territory Government will look at unlocking these sorts of potentials like ours are seen as helpful to that process. We were very pleased to mention as well that the Prime Minister of Australia has raised support of our project to the Singaporean Prime Minister recently on his visit in June. So we received really good support from the Australian government as well as other governments. Ultimately, there's a bigger story here, and that is what does this mean for the Northern Territory in terms of economic and cultural and social benefits, and what does that mean for Australia, together with then how can we play our role in lowering emissions in the region. And we see that these sorts of projects and the concept of generating large-scale renewable electricity and then either putting that and transmitting that into our own systems in Australia or exporting that overseas has massive potential. Just to put a couple of fine points on that potential before I close this presentation. This project, for example, Australian ASEAN Power Link, will be exporting approximately $2 billion worth of export revenue every year, starting in 2028. And that is roughly the equivalent of, our calculations show that's roughly the equivalent of the size of Australia's dairy industry altogether in terms of its exports every year. So the scale and the potential and unlocking that scale and the potential provides a really significant advantage for the Northern Territory and for Australia to actually benefit from our large scale resources and see us not only benefit from those in terms of how renewable electricity can be generated and inputted into our own economic growth, but how we can benefit from that in terms of our export revenue and the investment that will see into the country as well. Thanks very much, John. I'll leave it there.
Thanks very much, Georgie. I wanted to give people a couple of key stats because they might be thinking, how's it possible? How do you build a big mega solar farm in Australia and ship it in undersea cables to Singapore and still make money in that process? So people might be interested to hear just how much the cost of solar and storage have fallen. Here's some key stats. So the cost of buying a watt of capacity of solar PV. So this is a solar panel that might go on your roof. So 1 watt. has reduced 21% per annum every year for the past 10 years. Actually, the price has reduced 24 times in 12 years. So to buy a watt of capacity in 2008 would have cost you $4.12. $4.12. Today, buying that watt of capacity is 17 cents. That's a massive reduction in price. And it's not just happened with solar PV, although so the International Energy Agency now says that solar is the cheapest electricity in history. It's much, much cheaper than coal, gas, nuclear. The only thing that's actually very close is wind and solar. Very close now in terms. Solar is just slightly cheaper, but the thing to remember is that price continues to fall. So as Professor Martin Green from the University of New South Wales says, we're only a couple of short years away from that being not 17 cents, but 10 cents. Right? This just gets cheaper and cheaper. The cost of energy storage has also fallen. So to buy a kilowatt hour of lithium-ion batteries in 2010 would have cost you $1,100. This year, about 137. So a massive decrease. And once again, the prices continue to fall as we build more electric vehicles. Production increases, prices come down, and that actually unlocks absolutely everything. But there's another element to this, and that is you take a solar panel, you put it in Japan, South Korea, Germany. You take that same solar power and you put it in outback New South Wales or the Northern Territory or Western Australia. The exact same solar panel cost you the same amount of money. The one in Australia will produce up to 2.6 times more energy than the one overseas, right? This is our huge national comparative advantage. So we're actually sitting on the cusp of abundant world's cheapest electricity. Actually, we are unassailable because we have fantastic solar resources, wind resources. And all of a sudden, that is abundant, near zero marginal cost electricity that is also completely emissions free. So all of a sudden, projects like this actually don't just become economically feasible, but over time, the economics improve over time. This is the tip of the spear. This is the opportunity, the economic opportunity that Australia has to be powering our region and indeed exporting to the world and becoming a renewable energy exporting superpower. This could underpin the reindustrialization of the Australian economy, actually produce hundreds of thousands of jobs, not tens of thousands, right across the country. It's really exciting. We're on the cusp of something really dramatic here. And in fact, our governments need to transition because our workforces are locked into the high carbon exporting model. Those jobs are going to go. We need to transition people and transition them quickly. But the good news is no country has more to gain in this transition than Australia. And we've got to go from being a laggard to being a leader. That's the opportunity in front of us. So that's my little sort of background there, Georgie, for people to kind of give them a sense of the economics. One question I had was really about, you say that the project has major project status with the federal government. Can you tell us about that? And has that been helpful in terms of developing the project along?
Yeah, thanks so much, John. And by the way, my goodness, that was such a great spiel. We should, you can become a champion of our project, an honorary champion of our project, because your narrative, you really captured exactly the opportunity. And we are doing some modeling on this at the moment in terms of not just what our project could do, but future projects of this capacity, and putting some really hard data around that, which we'd love to share going forward. But it really goes to your point that data shows that we are unlocking really significant, essentially unlocking a whole new industry, and with that a whole new set of investment opportunities and mass scale jobs as well. So thank you very much for that. Just in terms of your question, in terms of the size and capacity, or your point around the size and capacity of this, and going forward, it's a really exciting opportunity, and Sun Cable would like to be the first of many projects in this regard. John, sorry, I've done that awful thing where I've kind of forgotten the the essence of your.
Yeah, no, fantastic. So thinking about that, the major project status. So the federal
Sure.
government, I think, is kind of is helping you in this regard. So really keen to learn about that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so we received major project status from the Commonwealth Government in July of last year. That came from Minister Andrews, who at the time was the Industry Minister, and also Minister Angus Taylor, the Energy Minister. And that process is quite extensive to actually be listed as a major project. And what that essentially unlocks is the capacity to be involved and integrated into the Major Projects Agency, which is located in DISE, the Department of Industry. And it actually unlocks essentially kind of a coordination across the whole government. So you have the capacity and the visibility of certain things that will affect the project, and government really helps to sort of drive how you might fix those obstacles, roadblocks if there are some, or accelerate other opportunities. So the major project agencies and that status has been very helpful. What we are very keen to do is that
I might just jump in if I may. Thank you very much for that. But with some breaking news, we were having a slight technical problem getting the Assistant Minister in from Queensland, but he has joined us now. So I just want to preserve as much time as I can to hear a few words from the Queensland Assistant Minister for Hydrogen Development and the 50% renewable energy target by 2030, Lance McCallum. We're so pleased, Minister, that you're able to join us today. I'm not going to give you the full bio treatment because we're short on time, but we're really keen to hear from you, and particularly your work in taking Queensland from being one of the laggards in Australia when it comes to climate to being one of the leaders, not just in Australia, but globally. So please welcome Minister Lance McCallum.
Thanks very much, John. I'll just check that you can hear me fine. Fantastic. And thank you to Georgie and Chloe for your contributions, both really informative and excellent. I'd like to, of course, begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land that I am joining you from today, the Yuggera and Ulgarapul peoples. Pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to any other First Nations people that are here with us today. I'm incredibly proud to be one of 3 First Nations MPs in the Queensland Parliament. I'd also like to acknowledge all the members and delegates of the forum here today, and thank you all for your commitment to clean energy as being fundamental to taking effective action on climate change. And I'd also like to extend the very best wishes from my Minister, the Minister for Energy, Renewables and Hydrogen, the Honourable Mick de Brenni. It's been a week since the Intergovernment panel on climate change delivered their 6th assessment report, and it's been 1 week for governments, industry and communities to look at that updated expert science and ask, are we doing enough? The report really reinforces the dire outcomes if our planet continues to heat up, but it also clearly shows that it's not too late to take action to make a better future. And every action that we take counts towards mitigating the impacts of climate change. And here in Queensland, the Palaszczuk government is taking strong action. We're committed to delivering our 50% renewable energy target by 2030 and net zero emissions by 2050. We're taking large strides, not small steps, in reaching our target. In 2015, when we were elected, there was almost no operational large-scale solar or wind farms in Queensland. But today, there are more than 3,200 megawatts of large-scale operational renewable projects across the Sunshine State. Already, renewables have delivered around 10 billion in investment, supported 7,000 construction jobs alone, most of those in regional areas, and they will save around 12.6 million tonnes of carbon emissions once they're all fully operational. We've got the highest uptake of rooftop solar in the world, which are also generating 3,600 megawatts of renewables, and we're well on our way to reaching our 50% renewable energy target from 2030. I always say it's not bad from a standing start in 2015. These figures will continue to grow because we're working in partnership with industry and communities to make sure that we power past our 50% renewables future. Through our new signature $2 billion Queensland Renewable Energy and Hydrogen Jobs Fund, we will be supporting our proudly publicly owned businesses to expand public renewables and storage, develop our renewable hydrogen industry so that we can help reduce emissions in other sectors like transport, and ensure that we can export our sunshine and wind to the world, whilst expanding our publicly owned renewable sector in a way that is driving local manufacturing jobs. In addition, we're also investing $145 million to grow our Queensland renewable energy zones and build more transmission infrastructure where it's needed. Already, we've got more than 66 gigawatts of potential clean energy in the pipeline after receiving registrations of interest from 192 renewable projects for our renewable energy zones. So this includes wind and solar projects, as well as batteries, pumped hydro, energy storage, and hybrid sites that have storage and generation. And last week, we launched a consultation paper on our Queensland renewable energy zones, which is available now online via the Queensland Energy Department's website. It's critical that we understand what local communities, business, manufacturers, renewable and hydrogen project developers view as important to deliver lasting, meaningful benefits for Queensland communities and workers. Our renewables industry right now is worth over $8.5 billion, and it needs to best benefit our families, workers, and regions. We have an ambitious plan to turn our abundant renewable potential into thriving new industries, including hydrogen production, and we're committed to a low emission, ethically produced hydrogen supply chain. Last month, we signed on as a founding partner to the Smart Energy Council's Zero Carbon Certification Scheme. And we did that to be able to give a guarantee that renewable hydrogen made in Queensland is exactly that, and carbon free. As the Assistant Minister for Hydrogen Development and the 50% renewable energy target by 2030, this is an action that I strongly back as part of our vision for renewable hydrogen in Queensland, which also includes Stanwell, one of our publicly owned energy companies, plans to construct a 3 gigawatt export scale renewable hydrogen facility on 236 hectares west of Gladstone. Our other state-owned energy generator, CleanCo, will kick off preliminary work to establish a future hydrogen and a future renewable energy precinct at Swanbank, where we've got a low emissions gas-fired generator currently. In April earlier this year, Origin signed an MOU with the Port of Townsville to develop a liquid hydrogen export facility, and in March, Sumitomo Corporation formalised its partnership with the MOU to develop Australia's first hydrogen ecosystem that includes renewables in Gladstone. So investing in renewable hydrogen is part of our climate action, and it's great to see such strong international investor confidence. Energy storage is also going to play an important and critical role in reaching our renewables targets. And our government is supporting and investing in projects that will grow storage capacity on our publicly owned network. The centrepiece of this is a $22 million commitment for a detailed design and cost analysis for a 1 gigawatt for 24 hours pumped hydro project at Barumba Dam. Large-scale pumped hydro is a game changer when it comes to energy storage solutions, and a pumped hydro facility of that size at Barumba would be a piece of nation-building infrastructure. The project has the potential to be the state's largest pumped hydro station, and we're also looking to strengthen the grid by investing in large-scale network batteries. 5 large-scale network-connected batteries are already being installed at substations in Townsville, Yeppoon, Bundaberg, Hervey Bay and Toowoomba as part of a network battery trial. Together, they'll have a combined capacity of 40 megawatt hours. More broadly, we've recently delivered our climate action plan to 2030, which outlines our roadmap to reach our emissions and renewables targets, create jobs and drive economic recovery from COVID-19. If you haven't already done so, I'd encourage you all to visit the Queensland Department of Environment and Science website to have a look at the details there, which includes some great data. In Queensland, we like to think that we're leading by example, and we don't want our momentum to stop. In the absence of a coordinated national plan, our Premier has commissioned the Minister for Energy, Renewables and Hydrogen to work with other key ministers, stakeholders and the community to develop a 10-year energy plan for Queensland. So finally, I'd just like to underline that in Queensland, our actions are hopefully painting a better picture of what a positive climate future looks like. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the rest of what's been a really engaging panel discussion. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Minister. Appreciate your support for the zero carbon certification scheme. Here's a suggestion: we would love to advocate along with you because Queensland, Brisbane now has the Olympics for 2032. We'd love to help you, apply the pressure so that we can make that 100% renewables, zero carbon event. We'd love to do that, and congratulations for Queensland for winning that really prestigious global event.
Thank you very much for those comments. Look forward to your support in that regard. I mean, it's fantastic for the entire nation that Brisbane and Southeast Queensland have been awarded the 2032 Olympic Games, and anybody that was following the selection process knows that, along with showcasing our First Nations involvement, that our beautiful environment and our strong climate action is central to us hosting those games.
Fantastic. Unfortunately, we're done with time, but what a fantastic session. To Chloe Hicks, to hear from the New South Wales government, all of the things that they're doing the heavy lifting to unlock lots more renewable energy and to have a vision for exporting that energy to the world. To Georgie Skipper, the Sun Cable project, the first of, I think, many that are going to be developed in Australia and around the world. To Georgie, congratulations and thank you. And finally, to Minister Lance McCallum from Queensland, really doing the heavy lifting to make renewable hydrogen, 50% renewables in Queensland a reality. And I'm looking forward to the day when we're going well beyond 50% in the future as well. Everybody, thank you very much for joining us. I think we're going to be automatically taken to our next sessions. But thank you for joining us. Thank you to the speakers, and back to you at the Better Future Forum.